The story commences with Spear, an individual from the Neanderthal era, positioned on the shoreline and vocally expressing his frustration towards Mira. He swiftly enters the ocean and attempts to swim, but he faces repeated resistance from the water, causing him to be propelled back to the shore. Observing this, Fang, a tyrannosaurus, stands nearby and witnesses Spear's struggle against the water's force. Spear rises to his feet and fixates his gaze upon the ocean, where he catches sight of a leaf floating atop the water's surface. Responding swiftly, he hastens towards the nearby trees and utilizes his improvised hammer to cut them down. Fang takes notice of his actions and contributes by employing her teeth and tail to aid in the tree-cutting process. Spear emits a mighty roar towards Fang as they collaborate in the collection of wooden logs. As nightfall descends, Fang succumbs to slumber, and Spear seizes the opportunity to construct a raft utilizing the gathered wood. Spear urges Fang to board the raft, but she adamantly declines. Determined to persuade her, Spear hastily ventures into the woods and employs an assortment of bugs as bait to entice Fang onto the raft. Eventually successful, he pushes the raft away from the shore, embarking on their oceanic journey. Spear takes on the responsibility of propelling the raft forward, while Fang assumes a passive stance, observing from her position. Due to exhaustion, Spear eventually finds himself compelled to join Fang on the raft, and Fang employs her tail to propel the raft. During the ensuing night, several sea creatures gracefully glide beneath the raft, illuminated by the rising moon's glow upon the water. Spear and Fang are suddenly greeted by peculiar sounds, arousing them from their slumber. To their astonishment, they witness a group of whales swimming alongside them. Reacting with a mixture of excitement and alarm, Spear and Fang vocalize their emotions towards the whales, prompting the majestic creatures to eventually submerge beneath the ocean's surface. Upon waking the following morning, Spear becomes aware of Fang's hunger. In response, he dives into the water, swimming diligently in search of sustenance. He persists in his search for food, swimming ceaselessly, yet his efforts prove fruitless, compelling him to resurface for a much-needed breath of air. Fang responds with a resounding roar, and in turn, he screams back at her. Weary and exposed to the scorching sun, they recline on the raft, their skin stinging from its rays. Suddenly, a peculiar sound captures their attention. Spear plunges into the water to investigate, discovering a colossal turtle. Spear seizes the opportunity, wrapping his hands around the turtle's neck as it maneuvers through the water. Meanwhile, Fang gazes longingly at the raft, salivating in anticipation. Spear resurfaces to replenish his air supply before plunging back into the water. The turtle launches an attack, but Spear deftly evades its advances, maintaining his stranglehold on the creature. He dives beneath the raft, compelling the turtle to surface, and Fang, noticing the opportunity, clamps her jaws onto it, bringing about its demise. Together, they hoist the turtle's lifeless body onto the raft, feasting upon its meat. Spear, struck with inspiration, envisions utilizing its shell as a shelter from the sun's rays. Pressing onward on their voyage, they chance upon a spectacle of fish leaping out of the water. However, their encounter takes a perilous turn as airborne dinosaurs swoop down, launching an assault. In the midst of seizing the fish, a tempest begins to brew, and a megalodon emerges from the depths. The rampaging megalodon lays waste to their raft, sending Fang and Spear plummeting into the water below. Fang finds herself in the megalodon's sights as Spear swiftly swims toward them. However, she skillfully evades its advances, desperately attempting to flee. The megalodon maneuvers menacingly, making repeated attempts to strike Spear, who deftly avoids its attacks. Eventually, though, it manages to ensnare him within its massive jaws. Resourcefully, Spear employs a piece of wood to deliver a piercing blow to the creature's mouth. Freed from its grasp, he swiftly swims back to Fang's side, but their reunion is short-lived as a colossal wave crashes upon them. Amidst the chaos, the megalodon resurfaces, prompting Spear to retaliate by thrusting his weapon into its eye. The tumultuous waves intensify, forcibly separating Spear and Fang from each other. Regaining consciousness on a distant beach, Fang awakens to the unsettling realization that she has been separated from Spear. Fang scours the beach, unleashing mighty roars in her search for Spear, but he remains elusive. Resting on the shoreline, she patiently awaits his arrival. Suddenly, a peculiar sound emanates from the nearby forest, piquing her curiosity. Drawn toward the source, Fang discovers a figure that initially appears to be Spear, only to realize it is merely a rock and a stick. Undeterred, she continues her exploration, eventually encountering another Tyrannosaurus named Red. Startled, Red swiftly retreats, and Fang cautiously circles a rock, hoping to locate him. As she stands upon the rock, Red observes her, but eventually Fang walks away. Meanwhile, a flying squirrel gracefully descends from a tree, landing on Spear's outstretched hand. Seizing a mosquito in its grasp, the squirrel consumes its meal, while Spear remains unconscious on the ground. Unfamiliar figures approach, carrying him away. On the other hand, Fang pursues an animal in a wild chase only for Red to make an appearance. Their competing growls intensify as they grapple for possession of the prey. Eventually, Red relinquishes the animal and departs, while Fang enjoys her meal and tosses a piece of meat to him. Red partakes in the offering, joining Fang in their shared feast. After regaining consciousness in an unfamiliar chamber, Spear finds himself covered in mud. Suddenly, a peculiar figure enters the room, revealing herself as a witch doctor. Filled with alarm, Spear hastily flees from the premises. Observing his flight, the townspeople give chase, prompting Spear to defend himself with his trusty spear. However, one compassionate villager recognizes Spear's fear and injury, stepping in to prevent further harm. This empathetic individual offers him sustenance and water, extending a helping hand. Meanwhile, Fang accompanies Red on their journey and eventually comes across a fruitful tree. Savoring the delicious fruits, they also partake in fermented ones scattered on the ground. As they indulge, they become slightly intoxicated, but continue to consume the bounty. Spear ventures into the witch doctor's abode, allowing her to tend to his injured arm. Through a series of hits and the application of a mysterious powder, he eventually succumbs to slumber. Later that evening, Spear shares a meal with the villager's family, yet the daughter remains apprehensive of him. In a light-hearted moment, Red and Fang engage in playful antics while attempting to capture fireflies. Meanwhile, Spear gazes at the sky and embarks on a solitary walk. Along his path, he encounters a wolf feeding on meat. The wolf snarls towards Spear, but he successfully subdues it, and they partake in the meal of the wolf's meat together. Amidst the foggy morning, Red strolls confidently, and Fang follows closely behind. Stealthily, they breach a barrier and infiltrate the town. Red viciously attacks the unsuspecting humans, devouring them, and Fang reluctantly joins in the frenzy. Spear, alerted by the commotion, swiftly emerges and spots Fang amidst the chaos. Grabbing a spear, he bravely attempts to confront Red, but Fang intervenes, preventing him from engaging in the fight. Despite his attempts to mount Fang's back, she resolutely refuses to let him join the battle. During the skirmish, Red lunges towards Spear, aiming to consume him. However, Fang swiftly intervenes, forcefully knocking Red off the roof. In a tragic turn of events, Red falls and meets his demise, impaled by a spike. Overwhelmed by guilt, Fang rushes to his side, mourning the consequences of her actions. With a heavy heart, she walks away in sorrow. Spear, understanding her grief, accompanies her in silence, leaving behind the man who had tried to communicate with him. As they venture forth together, Spear and Fang find solace in the shelter of the woods, where they sit amidst the rain. Spear attempts to console Fang regarding Red's death, but she remains indifferent to his words, choosing to ignore his comforting gestures. Spear stands up and moves to another spot, and eventually, Fang approaches him. They navigate through the rain-soaked forest until they stumble upon a cave. With caution, they enter the cave, and Spear ignites a fire. Intrigued, he notices the cave's depth and uses a lit stick to explore further. Inside, he discovers ancient paintings adorning the walls and examines them closely. One particular painting depicting a hand catches his attention, and he compares it to his own. Returning to Fang, Spear settles down beside her. The next day, he emerges from the cave and revels in the beauty of the surrounding forest. His gaze falls upon humans hunting antelopes in a nearby field, evoking memories of the cave paintings. Spear continues his journey and encounters an abandoned village, contemplating its past inhabitants. He picks up a spear and successfully captures an animal, carrying it back to the cave and dropping it on the ground. As night falls, Spear exits the cave and performs a ritual he witnessed Mira perform. While engaged in the ritual, he notices an owl gazing at him and shoos it away. After awakening to a peculiar sound, Spear and Fang find themselves confronted by a bear carrying a man on its back. The bear growls at them, and in response, Fang lets out a mighty roar, causing the cave to tremble as their roars clash. The bear retreats from the cave, prompting Spear and Fang to give chase. Unbeknownst to them, another bear lurks near the cave entrance and scratches Spear's back. Fang roars fiercely at both bears. Spear stands up and prepares to fight. They attack the men and the bears. Spear easily kills the man, while Fang kills the bear. Spear sees the symbol on the man's shield and realizes it's the same one on Mira's head. The second man prepares himself to confront Spear, but he realizes the futility of the fight and decides to flee. As he runs, he removes his helmet but stumbles and falls to the ground. Concealing himself, he observes as Spear and Fang emerge from the woods. Desperate to escape, he tries to flee once more, but Spear hurls his spear, piercing the man's leg and preventing his escape. Uttering Mira's name to the man, Spear attempts to establish a connection, but the man rises and engages Spear in combat. Fang seizes the man and devours him, while Spear picks up his sword and begins to practice with it, discovering his affinity for the weapon. Noticing a footprint nearby, they decide to follow its trail. Running through the woods, Spear and Fang eventually reach a human settlement. Spear instructs Fang to remain hidden in the woods as he ventures into the town in search of Mira. Walking through the streets, he comes across a building where several slaves are held captive. The slaves panic upon seeing him, but Mira recognizes him and embraces him. Despite his attempts to take her away, Mira refuses to abandon the other enslaved individuals. Spear exits the building with Mira and the other slaves. Suddenly, a growling sound emanates from the fog, and Spear readies himself for a fight. A group of men riding bears arrives in the town. The slaves kneel in deference to the men, but Spear remains prepared for battle. One of the men on a bear notices that Spear is wielding his fallen comrade's sword and lets out a cry. The men advance towards Spear, ready to attack, but the bears catch an unsettling scent, causing them to grow uneasy. Spear smiles as onlookers wonder about the strange occurrence, and Fang emerges from her hiding place. Fang stands atop a building and lets out a mighty roar, but unfortunately loses her balance and falls into the structure. In the midst of the chaos, a man attempts to attack Spear, only to be swiftly devoured by Fang. Spear and Fang engage in a fierce battle with the men, ultimately overpowering most of them. Meanwhile, a man inside his hut hears the commotion and rushes out, sounding a bell to alert the townspeople of the ongoing attack. The residents pour out of their homes and witness Spear and Fang fighting and eliminating several opponents. Rika, the chieftain's wife, emerges from her house and prepares to fight. Mira takes charge and urges the slaves to flee into the forest, with a man following her. The townspeople surround Spear, and Rika's son takes aim with an arrow, striking Spear. Mira retaliates by killing the man's bear, seizing his axe, and swiftly beheading him with it. Though Spear manages to break through the townspeople's shields, he sustains another arrow wound. In a strategic move, he hurls a man at the building, causing the boy to tumble off. At that moment, Rika emerges brandishing her axe, injuring Fang. She attempts to stab Fang's head with a spear, but Fang bites back fiercely, repeatedly slamming Rika onto the ground, ultimately leading to her demise. Spear and Fang continue their fierce battle against the townspeople. Spear manages to push the boy assailant away just as he lunges at him. The boy's life is abruptly ended. A crimson mist engulfs the town, and the townspeople persist in their attacks on Spear and Fang. Resourceful, the duo exploits the cover provided by the mist to systematically eliminate everyone in the town. In the meantime, the chieftain and his older son, Eldar, return to the town accompanied by additional slaves. Eldar blows a horn in an attempt to gather the townspeople, but there is no response. As they venture further into the town, Eldar is overcome with revulsion and vomits upon witnessing a lifeless body. Gradually, the mist dissipates, revealing the grim scene of death that now blankets the entire town. The chieftain desperately searches for his wife, but tragically discovers her lifeless form on the ground. Overwhelmed with grief, he cries out her name in anguish. Eldar, along with his younger brother, emerges from the shadows. In a solemn act of respect, Eldar and the chieftain bury the deceased townspeople in a cave, sealing it off with a massive rock. They then return to their boat, release the slaves from captivity, and place Rika and the boy's lifeless body on the vessel. They push the boat into the water, but the chieftain's overwhelming sadness prevents him from setting it ablaze. Understanding his father's grief, Eldar steps forward, takes the bow and arrow, and ignites the boat with a flickering flame. They don their protective gear, ignite the city, and embark on a mission to seek retribution. The scene now shifts to 1890 in England, where a man seeks shelter in a house amidst the falling rain. The butler informs him of an ongoing meeting in the study. Inside, members of an organization known as the Historical Society are gathered, engaged in discussion. Among them is Charles, a scientist who addresses the group, asserting that they are not fundamentally different from primitive men and can regress to such behaviors given the right circumstances. Interrupting the meeting, the butler enters the study and informs Darlington, one of the members, that the constable urgently wishes to speak with them. The constable delivers grave news, revealing that an inmate from the asylum has escaped, killing an orderly in the process. He urges caution, advising everyone to remain indoors, due to the dangerous nature of the fugitive. Darlington, however, claims they have the inmate in their midst, pointing directly at Charles, prompting him and the others to mock him with disdain. Darlington expresses his disbelief in Charles's theory. They perceive an unusual sound emanating from the upper floor, and the servant proceeds to investigate its source. Another crashing noise reaches their ears, and as they converse, an unfamiliar substance enters the cup of one of the individuals. They come to the realization that the liquid is blood and unanimously decide to check on the servant. Charles, Darlington, and a French gentleman ascend the stairs to assess the situation, only to discover the asylum patient feasting on the servant. They hastily retreat as he launches an attack, with Charles attempting to strike him using a chair, but the assailant remains unfazed. Seeking safety, they head towards the study, yet the relentless pursuer claims another victim. The trio makes a desperate attempt to escape, barricading themselves in a room. The deranged man forcibly enters through the window, prompting them to remove the barricade and flee to the armory. He follows closely, choking Charles, yet Darlington seizes the opportunity to load a firearm and shoots at the man. The assailant flees the room, and the trio arms themselves before exiting. With cautious steps, they navigate through the house, but suddenly find the deranged man standing beside them. Darlington attempts to shoot the assailant, yet he skillfully evades the bullets and launches an attack. Seizing Blakely, he headbutts him and employs him as a shield. The deranged individual makes further attempts to harm them, but Darlington manages to shoot and wound him. The assailant retreats, prompting Charles and Darlington to enter the study in search of him. Suddenly, the deranged man descends from the rooftop, knocking them both to the ground. Swiftly recovering, Darlington removes his shirt and engages in a physical confrontation with the insane man. Charles is taken aback when he notices a poster declaring Darlington as a boxing champion. Darlington delivers a series of punches to the man, but the man retaliates by strangling him, leading Charles to intervene and provide assistance. Darlington shoots the man with an arrow, causing him to plummet into a nearby pond. The duo proceeds to venture into the garden, only to have the man emerge from a cluster of flowers and hurl a flower pot at them. He forcefully knocks Darlington to the ground and proceeds to assault Charles. In a final act of defense, Darlington seizes a sizable bone and strikes the assailant, preventing him from devouring Charles. Darlington then removes his shirt once again, engaging the insane man in a battle reminiscent of a barbarian. He repeatedly pierces the man with a makeshift spear, ultimately delivering a fatal blow to his head. Witnessing the scene, Charles witnesses the turn of events and expresses his jubilation, while Darlington finally acknowledges Charles's correctness. Thank you so much for watching. The third part has concluded and the fourth part will follow shortly. Don't forget to check out our other videos and consider subscribing. Also, remember to tap the bell icon to receive notifications about our latest uploads. We look forward to seeing you next time.